Thank you for joining me today on the recap of Season 3, Episode 1, my conversation with Ann Marie McKenzie about numerology readings, and what it actually means to us in our lives. So, this is my first time listening back to an episode. I actually listened to this episode, I think, 3 or 4 times overall, which surprised me. And every time I listened to it, I got something new, something different that I kind of chewed on for a day or two, and then I listened again and then remembered something that I had heard from her the first time that resonated. And the biggest thing I got from this is that we are all searching for our purpose and our gifts. We're all searching for not just what it is, but that verification, that feeling that we get when we know we're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And for Ann Marie to share that the numerology helps with that it helps with that ultimate knowing of who and what you are, when we're waiting for the outside world to kind of tell us or verify it. We don't have to wait on that. There are other ways that the still small voice or God or universe, however you consider the higher power, will be verifying it for us, which I think is the best thing in the world. Because as I mentioned in the episode, I'd rather hear from God than from anybody else that what I am doing is right. And she ended, which I thought was a great way of ending, that our purpose changes. I think I forget that, and I think we forget that. Our purpose isn't always the same. It's not always going to look the same. It's not always going to be the same. But I have found that there's usually a theme that runs through it, that even though it may manifest differently, or it may look like something else at this point in our life versus another time in our life, there's usually a theme. And with her reading on me, which was scarily accurate, it just kind of reiterated that to me, that's the truth. So I also loved her story about how numerology came into her world, because I find a lot of things that I then do or study or become a part of me kind of go in the same way. How she said she was like, I'm done with dealing with the money stuff. I just want to be done with it. And this is the year, and we hear the things, like think about it and claim it and decide that, you're not available for it anymore, and like that you're gonna handle it. But it didn't happen the way she expected. She had said she went toward like the masculine way of doing things, which is never bad. We need that masculine, looking at her reports, doing money dates, time accountant. It wasn't until she ended up just taking a free class that a friend invited her to. I'm not even sure the friend was even doing the class. It was, a friend of a friend of a friend. And then she said that she took that class, and all of a sudden she goes, it wasn't necessarily like she wasn't learning, she was remembering it. And I think that's what I want to do with everything I quote unquote learn. I want to remember it. I don't want to learn it to tell me what to do. I want to learn it so I remember and I know how it works for me. And I just, as I mentioned during the podcast, I got chills, because when you hear those stories, and if as you become more fluent in your still small voice, you're just kind of now, oh, okay, we all have it. There are similarities just as much as there are differences. So I remember having the chills and just being like, yes, like I want more of those moments, just even for me personally. So it was great to kind of share in hers and have that feeling. As she was talking about numerology and how she was learning about it, and as she was studying it, she brought up a great point, which I feel like I wish we were further along. We're not, but we'll get there. Talk about feelings are in a different world than numerology. It's like two totally different, or math, or any version of number. Like numbers is in this tower over here, and feelings are in this tower over here, and they don't even have a walkway to meet them, and they don't have a bridge to meet them. Like, I feel like as a society, and even still to this day, I was hoping now that I'm older, they don't do the same thing in school, but it seems like they do. Like, you're either a math person, you're either a STEM math person, or you're a creative person. And that's not the case. You can be both. You can do both. And I think a lot of people are both, but we are just programmed to like silo people, and that's not the case. So I was just talking about numbers having a vibration and a frequency, just like emotions do, and they are connected. It was that snap in my brain of like, of course they're connected. Of course everything is connected. I remember being surprised years ago when my mother told me that Huey Lewis, so Huey Lewis in the news, or I think he's Huey Lewis now, was like a math professor for years. And as a kid, I was like, what? I don't understand that. But now, as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. You need the foundation, no matter what you do. If you're an artist, you need the foundation of just basic math, basic, I mean, even just 3 point or three, what is the framing thing? Setting things up in threes versus twos, it looks more aesthetically pleasing, or it does something to the brain. Like there's a reason, and that they're connected. Everything is connected. We like to pretend it's not. I love to pretend it's not on a regular basis, but it is. It's connected. So knowing, as she mentioned, it was a remembering, and yeah, it was a remembering. Yeah, like there's a reason that I end up rocking out numbers all the time. And it was, as she did my reading, it was very affirming. It was very like, okay, as she mentioned, it's like a mirror to yourself. And it was the truth. When she did that, I felt, it didn't translate in the episode. I felt very called out, and I felt in a good way, Don't worry, Ann Marie. It was definitely in a good way. But I also felt very vulnerable, looking back, because it was it was very to my core. This wasn't just something that was like, oh, like you like ice cream, or you like, you like the color blue. Like it was like hitting my heart and my soul. And as I got to watch her do it, y'all didn't get to see that part where she mentioned she has her spiritual support team, that shares clairaudient and clairsentient. She has those psychic gifts. So I could see her like, not, it wasn't obvious, but it was enough of like I could see her eyes move up, or like her head would turn. And looking back, I'm like, I wonder like if that's where she was getting that message. And it was just, it didn't feel scary at all. It didn't feel weird at all. It just felt loving and affirming. I cannot reiterate that enough. And I was just so surprised how numbers for me, which have been the bulk of my life, my entire life, and I've tried to run away from them, and have left me feeling, uncomfortable and disconcerted, and I'm full of anxiety and agitation. It was a comforting experience, and I wonder what it would be if we could make numbers a comforting experience as a whole, rather than the anxiety producing numbers that we tend to kind of have popularized in the world with all of the accounting and all the, I'm not saying, again, I make my money off of it. I'm not saying accounting is wrong, but what if numbers were an affirming experience as part of you, rather than, again, this silo where we do math and STEM over here, and this silo like where we get to be feeling and creative. So I just, again, all of these things have been rolling through my mind. She mentioned my numbers. Again, super called out in a good way. I do love to burn it all down. I do love change for the sake of change. I'm weird that way, and I know that, which is why I know I have to be not careful, but I have to be aware of the other people around me, because just because I want to burn everything down doesn't mean the people I love want to. Sometimes I do it with or without their approval, and usually that's when it feels really, really great. I'm not going to lie. But as I've gotten older, I'm learning the dance of comfort, and as she mentioned, communication and connection. That part, and as a kid, or as a young adult, I should say, I didn't quite understand that. I didn't quite understand how to use the change and for communication and connection. I would end up burning bridges inadvertently more than I wished. So now I'm taking it a little easier. My favorite part of this podcast was this is something I've talked a lot about in my blog recently, and I pretty much talk about it with everybody I know, is that loving structure so you can go with the flow. That it felt vulnerable, but it also felt like I just kind of wanted to get up and scream in joy, because the way she explained it made total sense. I have built a lot of freedom into my life in the last decade or so, but I built that freedom on a whole lot of structure, and structure that a lot of people probably wouldn't like. I got myself out of debt about 5 years ago. Well, I got myself out of my ex-husband's debt about 5 years ago. Working 2 to 3 jobs, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, going to job one, being done with that shift, going to job two, and then doing stuff, trying to have a life at night. I go to bed about 9 and I get up and do it all over again. Did that for about 3 years. Sometimes I would dog sit in the process, so that was awesome. But also really, really hard. Really, really hard, but I was doing it so I could have this freedom. And I still do that now in my life. I still have days where I'm kind of MIA, and it seems like I quote unquote do nothing, but I'm actually doing all the things so I can be flexible, I can be available, and I can do all the things that make it seem like I have freedom. Um, I made the comment during the podcast that, what y'all don't see is like the 3 hours of stuff this morning I did, and I got up early and I did the things so I could have the freedom today. And I have found that as I've gotten older, I just don't have as much, not tolerance, but I just don't have as much bandwidth. And it is maybe because I spend a lot of years maybe overdoing it. I might have fried myself out. Looking back, maybe didn't have to go so hard. Definitely wasn't joy in there. Thinking of what Ann Marie was talking about. But it's very much something I'm talking with a lot of people about lately, about like, you've got to have the boundaries and the foundation to then have the freedom. You can't have one without the other. It's never an either or. It's like the same thing with the silos, with the math and the arts. You can't just have free flow or like hardcore discipline. Like, it's got to be both. They only exist in their fullness together. So I just find so many connections as I think about this along the way. She definitely called me out on delegating. Yep, I can't imagine a woman in the world who doesn't have a problem with delegating, no matter what your number is. And that's definitely a challenge, because sometimes it is more work to delegate than it is to actually do it yourself. Let's just call it what it is. Sometimes it's just not the time or the place. So that's definitely something I will probably work on the rest of my life. I imagine there's a bunch of you in there with me also working on that. Um, Toward the end of this episode, we talked a little bit more about psychic abilities. And that's something I haven't necessarily embraced in myself. Let me rephrase this. I've embraced it. I also know that if I mention it to others, I think I'm crazy. So I don't really mention it or work with it probably as much as I would like to. I definitely just know things. I don't hear things. I don't see things. It's almost like, I don't know, isn't there a movie where one time, like all of a sudden they see the scene, the guy with the newspaper with the angel, he was in Friday Night Lights. That's how much I watched thing. It was like where he could go, he would see it all and he could go try to change it. Like that's kind of what it feels like. But it's not necessarily a seeing. It's just a knowing. And I use it for me. I use it for those I love, and I use it if I'm able to kind of say it. I say it without trying to freak people out. But it also has gotten me in trouble. It also, sometimes I don't want to interact with people because I don't know when it's going to come. I don't know when I'm going to see things or not see things. And I very much am aware of everybody and everything around me at all times, even when I'm sleeping. So working on this feel that she talked about bringing it in instead of having it out open everywhere. That's another challenge too. I've read, I don't know, every book, highly sensitive, highly perceptive, highly whatever, and it all seems very great and it all makes sense, but it never really seems to work for me. I don't actually know how to turn it off, which could be why I just enjoy being alone, like truly alone, like nobody in the house alone. And so I don't have to work. I don't have to spend all that extra energy, and I can just be. It's never anything personal, and I've never been able to explain it to people. Like, it's not personal. It's just I tell the story that, like, you know, traditionally, if God Himself showed up, I'd be like, I need you to leave because I need my time. And we're talking about the universal life force, then I'd be like, I need you to leave and do my thing, which makes people laugh. But it's also the truth. Like, that means I know that I can connect inside. Now, if inside showed up, that's a whole different rabbit trail. But it is difficult to explain to those who either can bring in their field or don't have that perception. Which is why I'm very, 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 very picky with how and when and who I spend my time and what I do with my time. I just don't know when and where, and I've kind of got to be ready uh, to handle whatever it throws at me, and then what's going to happen tomorrow, or all the obligations and things that I want to show up for, and that I want to be available for. So a lot of this stuff, like I've just been thinking about it and taking into consideration just everything and everyone, because that's what I do. And usually I think about me last, trying to put me a little, maybe, I don't know, maybe 10th on the list instead of like 80th. Um, I've been thinking a lot lately. Funny, when she and I did this podcast, I've been wrestling with what I do for a living, which essentially is numbers and managing all of that and making that make sense in the world. That's, as I mentioned, what I built my career on. And I love doing it. I really love doing it. I love finding that missing penny in checkbooks. Like, I love figuring out and looking at something and then solving a bigger problem. Like, I just like knowing that the money trails are clean and honest and very clear, that no matter where you look, you can tie it back. It's very, very, very important to me. And I feel that's the same way with everything in my life. I just want it to be clear. We don't need to, make it pretty. It just needs to be clear and easy to understand. But I've been looking more at, like, do I embrace that part of myself? Do I spend more time with that part of myself when I've been running from it pretty much every moment I'm not working, essentially? And how do I integrate that? I've been looking at doing some more courses or more studying. Just personally for me, do I want to keep pursuing that? Do I want to keep pursuing what I'm doing here? Are we just going to do it all and figure out how it matches up in the end? That tends to be the way I go through things. So I just was fascinated that Ann Marie and I spent maybe 40 minutes together. And I've got lots of verification and validation that I'd forgotten until I listened to it again. And then as I listened to it, I was like, yeah, but it's amazing how even when you're being told that you're not right, even when you're being told that, like, this is who you are and you're being affirmed and validated, how quickly we shut that down and we think of what we should do with it, or what is wrong, or how do we match it, and just not letting the affirmation come in. And it was very affirmative, and it will continue to be affirmative. Actually, I should probably listen to it weekly to have it be more affirmative, and maybe it'll get into my brain that there's nothing wrong with me, that this is just the way I'm made, and I just have to figure out how it supports me joyfully and how I can use it in service in the world. So I'm so grateful to Ann Marie for all that she did, all that she helped and supported, and all the back end support, even on the end, as I tried to get this episode out. And I'm going to keep thinking about this one. Like, I'm probably going to keep thinking about all of them. When you're in conversation with people, we could have gone down so many rabbit trails on that one, and I could hear it in my voice how kind of nervous and called out I was in a good way. It kind of felt like being naked in front of a bunch of people I didn't know. Not a favorite thing, but at the same time, I also knew it was like, okay, this is who I am. Like, we're all made the same way. There's really not parts of the body that nobody knows that the other person doesn't have. At the same time, it was very revealing. So it felt like a big step on a lot of levels for me. So I'm just excited to keep doing this season. I think Hillary is going to be next. She is a wellness coach, and I'm excited to talk to her about body and listening to this my voice and how that comes up. I'm very excited to see what comes out of that episode, and then what I can dig out and talk about outside of that episode. And I've got another one lined up. Super excited for this one. We're going to go down a lot of rabbit trails with Janice. That one's going to be super fun. I think we'll probably just be laughing. Hopefully we'll just make you laugh. It'll be a little lighter, not as heavy, but that's just the way we do things. And with Hillary too, we're going to have a great time. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm so excited that you listened, and please let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. I'm happy to either answer them or reach back out to people and get them answered. And I will see you next week for the episode with Hillary, and I will see you then.